So Mayor of our city, it's great to see you again.
Great to see
Finally,
you. Yes.
hope the COVID thing just really completely disappeared.
Absolutely.
So the first question is this: what do you think is your greatest accomplishment during your 9-year, almost 10-year mayor of Los Angeles?
Well, it's great to see you, Michael, and thank you for the coverage from the beginning of my time here and consistently. You know, it's this job you do so much in a week, and so much in a month, and so much in a year, more than I think most Angelenos even know. I was with my staff recently going around the table with 15 new employees, and just listening to what 15 of a few hundred mayor employees do, 40,000 city employees do. There's so much from cleaning our air to building up the economy of the future to building infrastructure. I would say what I'm proudest of is that we didn't govern just for today. We really wanted to build the city of tomorrow. We reestablished basic city services, whether it was repairing pipes that burst in my first year on the streets of Sunset Boulevard, whether it was looking at transportation lines, the airport which was crumbling, our port which was having problems. It's really the infrastructure of tomorrow I think I'm proudest of, together with the Olympics coming in 2028. Because if you're governing right, you're not governing for this year. You're governing probably for the next mayor and for the next decade after you leave. So whether it's 12,000 units of homeless housing, 15 rapid transit lines, a brand new airport, transportation to the public transportation to the airport, the port, or the Olympics coming, I think all of those really prepare Los Angeles for a strong, robust future with a strong economy, a more livable city, and hopefully more justice for everyone.
So the next mayor can enjoy all the things that you had to work for.
Absolutely, we always pass the baton, and I think too often we're worried about the headlines of tomorrow and not thinking about the long term. It's part of the reason that some of the problems from homelessness and housing to our air quality, I really inherited that. It took 40 years for us not to build enough housing. It's going to take more than 10 years to build enough housing, but we're well on the road now.
Do you sometimes feel that way? When you came in, the first couple of years it was okay, but then suddenly this homeless issue came up, and there were like 21,000 homeless people, and now that number has grown to 41,000. And some people have been saying, how come we are spending more money, but we have more homeless people now? I think the most recent figure is like 10 billion?
1 billion.
1 billion.
Of city money, yeah.
So it's like you just became mayor, and you got hit with this. Do you feel like, it was supposed to be, they should take care of this? Do you feel that way? And you with the ACLU lawsuit and all that.
I accept the challenge. I think a lot of people think a city government has the responsibility for homelessness, and I agree with them, even though we don't have the power. On most things that cause homelessness or cure homelessness, that's really county government, state government, and federal government. And think about all the things that cause somebody to be homeless. A veteran coming home from war, a child coming out of the county welfare system, somebody who's experiencing mental health care, addiction, folks who have survived sexual or domestic violence. These are things that really exist in other levels of government, but I wanted a city hall that didn't turn its back, didn't turn its face. The reason homelessness has gotten so bad is 2 reasons. High price of housing, we haven't built enough housing for 40 years, and trauma. All the mental health, loss of a job, divorces, like the things that conspire together when trauma meets high rent, people live on the streets or in cars. But no, I disagree with people who say, we're spending too much, and it's not getting better. If we hadn't spent that money, it would be even worse. And what it did is we set some big goals, like building 10,000 new units of homeless housing. We're going to pass that by more than 1,000. We used to be 300 a year of new apartments for people who are homeless opening up. This year it'll be over 2,000. Next year, 2,000. So we're right at that tipping point now, where I think the work of the last 3 or 4 years is we saw this tsunami of homelessness come. We didn't sit here saying, let's just throw money at it or do nothing. Yeah. We really built new shelters, tiny home villages, permanent housing. We're announcing tomorrow now we'll be up to 15 Project Home Key, which is buying old motels and old buildings to be able to make them into permanent housing. I think the next 2 or 3 years we will see homelessness come down. Yeah. The last thing I'll say, Los Angeles and no mayor and no Los Angeles city government will ever solve homelessness if we don't have federal and state help that is consistent and universal. We have no healthcare system for mental health care in this country. So the tragedies we see on the street is because people have been left by themselves without a mental health care bed to get rid of their addiction or schizophrenia or whatever they have. And second, we don't have a right to housing. And this is more controversial, but I believe that America should provide housing for people who are homeless. It's cheaper than keeping them on the street. And every country that's gotten rid of homelessness provides that as a right. We do that with food stamps. 100% of people who would be hungry get food. We do it with Medicaid, which we call Medi-Cal here. If you don't have health care and you're poor, we make sure you don't die. But when it comes to housing, it's a lottery. And so 1 out of 8 people who need housing assistance get it from the federal government here in Los Angeles. 7 out of 8, many of them are homeless.
What do you think about there was a study like in Finland and Mississippi, I don't know whether you know it, but they seem to have solved a lot of the homeless problem by actually offering them houses and let them live instead of shelter. Do you agree with that?
I do. I think shelters are necessary to get some people off the streets, but housing is the only long-term solution. Homes solve homelessness. Mississippi, you can probably do it for a quarter of the price because housing is very expensive here. So cities where you see less of it, the trauma moves indoors because you can afford it. Finland isn't cheap, but they made the commitment. You can't deal with someone's drug addiction if they're on the streets. You can't deal with somebody's child care needs if they're on the streets. You can't deal with their injured leg if they're on the streets. So they put people in housing first. And that's where the housing first philosophy comes from. I completely agree with it. Like I said, we've moved from about 300 units a year to more than 2,000. But I would encourage the next mayor, try to find the dollars to double that again. In fact, we're putting something on the ballot this November that would be a tax on ultra-rich homes when they get sold. That would raise maybe 5 times more than we spend today on building new housing.
I do see some improvements in Koreatown around our company. Actually, there were really a lot of homeless people, but it's gone. And
it's starting to thin out.
Yeah, and also in the MacArthur Park.
Yeah. And I think the numbers that we'll see this year, I don't know where they'll be exactly. It will show no increase this year. And I think by next year we'll start to see a decrease. And that is one thing I'm very proud of. We figured out a way to take teams onto the streets, not just push people to the next block, but get them in a hotel, get them in shelter, get them into housing. We just need to build more to make sure they don't go back to the streets.
So the next mayor would have it a little bit more easier?
I hope so. Knock on wood.
So how's your relationship with the Korean American community? I know you've been since your city council days in CD13 and city council president, it's probably 20 plus years.
Yeah, exactly.
What are the most memorable moments with us?
So many. I mean, the Korean American community has been, to me, one of the main pillars of my time, not just as mayor, but as an elected official. My old district was really included parts of Koreatown now. I live adjacent to Koreatown, so in some ways it's the community that I'm closest to geographically. But whether it's commissioners who have led us on our pension boards or the president of the Harbor Commission, folks who have been deputy mayors for economic development, for city services, my first executive officer, Korean Americans have served at the highest level and most important levels directly in my administration, is as commissioners to help us move important issues from our economy to our environment. But also, I would say, I think Korean Americans too have kind of come into their own. We marked, of course, the anniversary of Saigu 30-year anniversary. It was a moment where I felt we don't turn our backs on the past, but when something happened like the anti-AAPI hate that we saw on the streets, we mobilized so quickly, so strongly, that this year, in the second quarter, we saw, for instance, an 82% reduction in the number of incidents. So we know that there's still discrimination. We know that there still needs to be empowerment of the Korean American community. But even redistricting showed finally putting into a single district, Koreatown, that I think the Korean American community has really come into its own. We obviously lost one, but 2 council members will have served here. To me, these are encouraging signs. It's been, to me, a community that's both incredibly friendly and incredibly demanding in a good way. You can be a friend and still demand good representation, and you can demand representation and still be a friend. And I think that's the best description.
And I don't know whether you remember this, we ate at Chosun Kari.
You do? Of course I do. Exactly.
One-on-one talk, and we talked about a lot of the projects. Korean American, I think Museum project was one of them. It has been stalled, and I don't think it's the city's fault. And would it go forward, in your opinion, or is there a possibility for the project to fall? Because there has been some talks, probably this might not happen at all.
I think 2 things need for it to go forward, and I've actually had a number of conversations just in the last month on this, because I too have looked at it as I come to the end saying, this was something I would hope would have already had a groundbreaking, already starting to come up. One is the community. The community, I think, has to be more unified. And by the way, by the community, I don't just mean the Korean American community. The entire community, whether it's businesses that are here, foundations, everybody should be contributing to something like this the way we do for the Science Center or as we're seeing at LACMA. This is going to be a community asset, but especially in the Korean community to continue raising money. Even though there's been tens of millions raised, we need to get that last piece. Second is the state government. And I've talked to our assembly member and our federal government. I know that Jimmy Gomez, Miguel Santiago are looking for those, because the city doesn't have excess money. We gave the land. That's the biggest contribution. And now we have to think,
per year, right?
Exactly, the best price you can get. But I think this should be a dream not just of the Korean American community, but for all of us. For instance, I love it when somebody who's Guatemalan goes to see something in Boyle Heights and learn about Mexican community, or you see somebody who's African American in Thai town. We're not building things just for ourselves. We're building things so that we educate each other. And I think most Angelenos don't know the history of Korean immigration here, of Korean Americans. So this is a real asset for everybody. So in my last few months, I've been talking to state officials, hoping we can maybe get something in this coming year's budget to really help take it over the top.
Got it. Okay. And Miramar City, I think I asked you this question probably in 2014-ish when you stopped by Koreatown. You said back in 2014 to the Korean American community about making the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. School available to the community as a green space park. But it didn't happen. Can you kind of explain to?
Yeah, I was hoping that it would. The main thing is that high schools, they don't do joint use agreements with the playing fields because they're used so often. We do have a joint agreement with the other part of the school that is a park. So Brecken Parks now does, but that's not a green space as much as a memorial space. But we are looking, one of the schools, what's the elementary school that we're looking at? Kuenga. So Kuenga, which is in Koreatown, we're now looking at elementary schools work better for those joint use agreements, and we're going to have 5 of them roll out, and Kuenga is going to be one of them this coming year. We need the school district's agreement. I thought we would get it. I understood why, but they said, look, we just use this all the time. If we open it up to the community, we've got to have our security, our kids here, because we have the teams playing almost year-round and all week long. I do think it's a big problem, though, still, that Koreatown doesn't have kind of one big green space in the middle, and land is so expensive. Yes. So it's something I think for all of us to look at long term. I think about some of the empty properties that are around. It would require a big and generous person to come in. For instance, some of the stuff that's been slated for EP5 development. It wouldn't be giant parks, but something that would be in the center, let's say between Western and Vermont, between maybe 3rd and Olympic. We need to add park space, but we will get that through the school close by.
Okay. And crime rate has gone up. LAPD budget was cut $150 million, and some people have criticized about that. And since then, homicide has gone up. So what do you say to people who feel less safe here to live in LA?
I think I always acknowledge people's feelings. We can show statistics that it's half the level of crime as it was in the 90s and early 2000s, but your feeling doesn't matter if you're a victim or somebody that was a victim of crime. To me, statistics are less important than that feeling. So I've worked very hard. We had cuts in every department, by the way. $150 million from police was not unique, but we were able to restore that not only to the police department, but to all our departments when we got federal assistance during the COVID pandemic. And we've seen an increase in the police budget. We've authorized the rehiring of police officers. We want more people to become police officers, and especially from the Korean American community, we hope that we can get more candidates because it's a tough time for people to say yes to becoming a police officer. And I've gone to almost every police graduation saying, we love you, we support you. I told people, if you're looking for somebody to defund the police, I'm your wrong mayor. I think we will always need police officers. I think we have a great department. We can always improve, and I take seriously whenever a police officer does something criminal or something that violates policy. But come on, I mean, this is a city that when somebody robs a bank, breaks into your car, attacks you, we of course want to have folks who aren't police officers helping with non-police work like mental health care. That's a great way to take resources like the vans we now have downtown that answer 911 calls. Instead of a police officer, if someone's having a mental health emergency, we send a doctor instead of a police officer. But when it comes to crime, I think we need police. So we're seeing already some, this is the second time crime's gone up since I've been mayor. It happened the first couple of years, and we added a lot of things to new strategies, brought crime back down. This next tick up, luckily, now we're seeing homicides down 5% this year. We're seeing shots fired down. We're seeing property crimes be the main driver now. It's up about 13%. And really, we need everyone's help on that. Be smart, protect your stuff, don't leave stuff in cars. And we're seeing a lot of breakthroughs in getting to the criminal gangs that are organized with their property crime, whether that's break-ins to businesses or whether it's the home invasion burglaries that we saw that were very troubling with some tragic outcomes. We've taken down a lot of those organized groups now. And so we're beginning to see this year, in the second half of the year, already a slight reduction as well.
So when I talk with people, they don't blame you about the crime rate going up, but they do seem to talk a lot about George Gascon a lot, and also the liberal policies that it's swinging. It has been swinging to the left, and we thought this year might be a moderate year, but I don't know, the primary year doesn't seem to indicate that. Do you worry about things swinging going back and forth?
I do. I think if we swing back and forth between too far left, too far right, or maybe it's not left and right. Some people want humanity with no consequences, and other people want consequences with no humanity. And both are wrong. Think about it as a parent. You can't raise a child with no consequences, no matter how much love you give them. And you can't just give people consequences without any love. Either way, they're going to turn out bad. And I think our criminal justice system is the same. We need to acknowledge what's broken. We didn't have a lot of humanity. Oh, you have a gram of cocaine too much, you're away for 20 years. Or marijuana, you get a record as a 15-year-old and you never have an opportunity to turn your life around. And we pay for it, very expensive. On the flip side though, if somebody's released every week and still is breaking into cars every week, we need to lock that person away. So one of the things I've encouraged our district attorney to do is to have more flexibility for discretion. My father was the district attorney.
Yes.
You have to trust your prosecutors to have discretion to add enhancements. For instance, women who are the victims of domestic violence, they were not filing any enhancements anymore against people who had been previously convicted of domestic violence. To me, that's not a victim-friendly policy. On the other hand, sometimes somebody can see somebody and say, look, they've had some bad mistakes, but they've really turned their life around. Let's divert them from jail time. But without discretion, we really, I think, see the worst side of things. So I hope that our district attorney learns from that. And I would be worried if it was just all back to law and order, because that failed in the 80s and 90s. And if it just went all to release everybody like we saw during the pandemic, and judges saying, we're not going to put anybody in jail. People like me have to then clean that up and make people who feel very unsafe be safer. So I think it's humanity and consequences together.
Okay. And let's talk about anti-Asian hate crime. It has increased in LA. Actually today, I stopped by Starbucks and the one guy beside me, I was talking with my colleague in Korean.
Right.
And said, if you're gonna speak in Korean, get out of here.
So where was this? In Koreatown?
In Koreatown, yeah. Actually,
you should have said, actually, you're in Koreatown. Why don't you get out of here?
I think he wasn't in his right mind.
Right.
So, I just let it go. How can we prevent
sorry.
this?
It takes three things: education and enforcement. And it also takes, I think, a third thing, which is engagement. We do all three. And when we saw this very troubling thing, it started at the beginning of the pandemic, when people started blaming a virus which doesn't have an ethnicity, calling it China flu, even the president. And we saw our Chinese American community, or anybody who people decided looked Chinese, start to get attacked or yelled at. And I think it opened up the door for racism that always bubbles underneath. We launched two things. First, our first Human and Civil Rights and Equity Department. And under the leadership of our new general manager, we put a huge campaign, talked with a lot of AAPI groups and others, saying that LA is for everyone. We have pins, posters, you'll see it all over our schools, everywhere, the education piece. Second, we engaged the communities, whether it was self-defense training, whether it was listening to where this is happening, or letting people know, call 911. Sometimes when we have more reports of things like domestic violence, it's a good thing because so much of it goes underreported. I never look at the statistics and say, oh, whoops, there's more domestic violence. Sometimes I say maybe the 3 out of 4 times it happens and nobody calls, maybe they're calling more now. And we want to see those numbers be more honestly reported. And so I hope last year when more was getting reported, it was a combination of the bad news that there was more API hate, the good news that more people had the courage to report.
Okay.
And then third, enforcement. We've gone after people, we've caught people, we've charged people, and we have worked with the district attorney. District attorney has been very supportive to enhance penalties. When there's crimes committed and there's a hate crime there, that should have an extra penalty because it sends the message that this is unacceptable here in Los Angeles. So we're going to continue really building a city of belonging, which is how I think about it. Asian, American, and Pacific Islander communities belong here, built here, own this city, and they need to feel as safe as anybody else.
Yeah. With the 2028 Summer Olympics bring an economic boom in LA, do you expect?
Yes, that's, one of the reasons I went after the Olympics wasn't just the joy it brought in 1984 when I was a little kid and wanting to pass that on to my daughter. It was the economic benefit. I mean, think about it. Mayor Bradley built our first international terminal, got the funding finally secured for our first subway and light rail. And similarly, I know that this really inspires a city to invest in itself. We estimate when it was going to be a 2024 Olympics, it would be about a $15 billion economic boom. This is going to be 4 years later, so I would say it's going to be higher, more like a $20 billion economic boom. We will make money and a profit from the Olympics. Most Olympics lose money, and we will make money because we have everything basically built, or we're building it for ourselves, not for the Olympics. And second, I think it will inspire a lot of investments when you see Washington and Sacramento saying, we want to help with America's Olympics, and they will help us accelerate our rail lines, our housing, our environmental work. It's a real great chance for us to show off the best of LA. And I can't wait to be a former mayor sitting in the stands.
Okay, the next mayor is going to probably take the food.
Yes, exactly. It's going to be in my letter of all the gifts I give the next mayor. Here, enjoy.
Okay, but you probably going to still be.
Oh yeah, I'll be in the front row watching the games.
How would you like to be remembered?
The only way I want to be remembered, I don't spend a lot of time on legacy. I think too many politicians get things named after them, or
well, you had it tough, homelessness and also the pandemic.
I just want to be known as somebody who loved my city and poured everything I had into protecting the lives and the people of the city and building the city of the future. I will judge, I'm my own toughest critic, and I will judge my success 10 years from now, sitting around as a grandfather or with my daughter and looking at an airport that works and rail lines that allow us to get around without getting into our cars, and cleaner air and 100% renewable energy and good jobs for people and fewer tents on our streets. To me, it's not what I did bring the Olympics or passing Measure M or this. It's just, I want them to know every day I woke up and I never made a judgment based on anything but my love for the city and love for its people. And if people say, sometimes I agree with him, sometimes I didn't, tough issues, but he gave it his all and he loved the city and he loved me, I'll be happy.
Well, what do you do in your downtime? Do you play your jazz?
What's downtime? Yeah, I play the piano. I spend a lot of time with my wife and my daughter and our former foster children. I hike, just went for a great hike in Griffith Park once a week. I explore the city with a hike, exercise with friends, play soccer, basketball, tennis, go out to Koreatown for a good meal, go to, BCD Tofu House or something after playing soccer in Koreatown. I love exploring LA. I think, hopefully when I'm done, I can get like a little show or something, Secrets of Los Angeles, and just share all the wisdom of the great taco trucks and the hidden tunnels and the amazing hikes. LA is a city that I love to explore, and to me, that's how I recharge.
I know that you didn't endorse any candidate yet,
Yeah.
but what do you want the next mayor to do, to focus on?
I would say to the next mayor, double down. If we were able to take housing and make housing starts threefold, double that again. If we were able to take homeless housing and go from 300 to 2,000 a year, double that again. I would say guide the city, love the city, don't do what's popular, do what's right. Think about yourself 10 years from now, making the decision of today. Am I making the right decision looking back? Not thinking about the criticisms of right now or the headlines of tomorrow or the glory of next week. I would say continue to really connect the city, because there's nothing that's bad about LA that can't be fixed with what's great in LA. Think about poverty. We have Hollywood and aerospace and the port, and all those kids that are living in poor neighborhoods need is a connection, a way in to get an internship, to get there. Focus on and the last thing I'd say is focus on the details. Block by block, fix those sidewalks, trim those trees, replace the pipes, the things that'll never give you a headline. For 40 years, our street quality had gone down. I became mayor. It's gone up every single year since. And we still got some that we need to do, but people don't complain, oh my God, the streets are falling apart. If we get the basics right, we can do the big things. When you do the big things, you can make a great city.
I think it was on Times yesterday that a lot of citizens from LA and San Francisco left to other states.
Yeah.
And what do you say to people that LA is kind of unfriendly to business?
I don't know if I think it's less business unfriendly. We've reduced our city's business tax. We're making it quicker to get things done. And although we can be even more business friendly, I think it's the cost of housing. And in some ways, it's okay. We had too many people coming to LA when the economy has been quite good under my watch. We had more jobs than housing units. And that caused rents to go up. It caused people at the bottom to be pushed into homelessness. So it's okay after decades of California growing like this for us to level off and get things right. We need a little time to build that city of tomorrow, for these rail lines to be finished, for the housing to get constructed, and to make it more livable. But we also need to make the changes in our own attitudes to say yes to more construction. In the state law, for instance, that would allow condominiums and other things to be built so we could have home ownership, maybe not of a single family home, but New York City has a higher percentage of homeowners now than the LA city does, which is crazy because of state laws. So we need to make some changes to make it a friendlier city, but to me, I don't take that as bad news. I take it as a chance for us to breathe, to build, and to get it right.
Any last words for our readers and the Korean American community?
I'm not, I'll have an even better title than mayor when I'm gone from City Hall. I'm going to be a constituent, Angelino. And I mean, to everybody in the Korean American community, I just say kamsahamnida. Thank you for the friendship and the work that we've done together, and count on me to be an ally to this community long after I'm here. I've never done this because I'm your mayor or your council member. I've done it because of the friendship and closeness I feel, the relationships that I have, and I hope that you will look to me to be an ally. Maybe we'll come to City Hall together, meet with the next mayor, and make some demands for the community together.
Okay, the last question. CD10 has not had a representative, since MRT.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
a lot of people have wanted me to ask you.
Yeah.
I mean, can you consult? What kind of words do you encourage them, or not having a representative? We don't know when we're going to have one.
I mean, get ready for the election. It's never too early for 2 years from now. But yes, I think the community needs to, with a clear voice, demand consistent representation, consistent and legal representation in the interim. It's great to have a good council office that's doing the work, and I think they are, but you need a leader as well. And so if the courts aren't clear that that's Mr. Weston or Mr. Ridley Thomas, we need to have somebody consistent for the next 2 years so people can know who to go to. That person can be held accountable. Projects like the museum park can get done. In the meantime, get ready because 2024 will be the first time you can vote on an entire Koreatown in a single district.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. A great pleasure.